Hey guys, before we get started on this episode, just wanted to give a massive shout out to the family of our Attles, of course, Warriors legend who passed away in the last couple of days, aged 87. My condolences to the entire Warriors family, anyone that had the privilege and honour of knowing Al personally. I think we've seen from the tributes over the past 24 hours, not just the impact that he's had on the Warriors organisation, but on people personally with just how good of a human being he was. Of course, started his career with the Warriors as a player in the early 1960s, transitioned into a player coach by the end of the decade, and then after he retired in 1971, was coach for well over a decade until the early 80s. Obviously included the triumphant 1975 championship that will forever be in Warriors history. After his coaching career, spent years and years in various front office roles, ended up spending over 6 decades with the Warriors, which is an NBA record for any one person with any one organization. Absolutely unbelievable achievement, absolutely unbelievable career, unbelievable life. Shout out to his family. I know that there are people watching here on YouTube that are old enough to remember either our Attles coaching career or perhaps even playing career as well. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to experience any of this, but if you did, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear any stories or any thoughts that come to mind when you remember our Attles. So a massive shout out to him, his family, the Warriors family. Very sad time, obviously, for the franchise, but he will be forever etched in Warriors history. Hall of Famer, number 16 jersey hanging in the rafters forever. So RIP, Al Attles. So all throughout this week, ESPN have had their group of experts predict and vote on some major question marks entering next season, things like player awards, West and East standings, a lot of the other major storylines as well. So I thought I'd spend this episode just unpacking some of it, particularly from a Golden State perspective. A lot of things I agree with, a lot of things I disagree with, a couple of things that are a little bit bizarre as well. So we'll get into it. Let's start with the Western Conference standings, which only came out earlier today. These are the predictions for the Western Conference according to the ESPN experts. So they had the Oklahoma City Thunder on top. Don't think there's any really surprise there. Let me go through all of them, and then I'll come back through and unpack some of it. So Thunder, Wolves, Mavs, Nuggets, Suns, Kings as the top six. Pels, Warriors, Grizz, Rockets, play-in tournament 7 to 10. And then the bottom five, the Lakers, Clippers, Spurs, Jazz, and Trailblazers. So I think the top and the bottom, not overly surprising. I think everyone probably acknowledges that the Jazz and the Trailblazers are likely to be at the bottom of the Western Conference, even despite the Jazz retaining, and extending Larry Markkinen. So they'll have him obviously next season. But those two teams, I think, are probably in a clear tier at the bottom by themselves. Maybe even Portland at the complete bottom in a tier by themselves. And then at the top, the Thunder. Obviously, going to be another year older. Got all that internal development still to come. The Wolves, strong season. I wouldn't necessarily have them second personally. Maybe they'd be third or fourth for me. The Mavs deserve obviously the respect of actually being Western Conference champions, and it's surprising how I think some of us can forget about them a little bit, even though they did make it through to the finals. Obviously, from a Warriors perspective, it's going to be super fascinating to see how Clay goes there. The Nuggets as well. I think those are the obvious top four probably, but I could also see Phoenix, who ESPN have fifth. I could see them kind of jumping into that top tier of group. I could see them making way for either the Nuggets, the Mavs, or the Wolves. I expect a huge season for Phoenix. Obviously, brand new coach in Mike Budenholzer. A couple of really savvy free agent pickups, particularly Tyus Jones, who I've spoken about previously on this podcast. So I wouldn't be surprised if they make a jump up to the top four. I'd probably have that five, maybe, as a tier. I think the Thunder might be in a tier by themselves, particularly during the regular season. I just think because they're still so young, they're probably going to have the energy to play through an entire regular season, maybe not necessarily have the injury concerns that older veteran teams might, and they could easily win 60 games as a result. Now, that may be a little bit difficult given just the competitive nature of the Western Conference. I mean, it's crazy that a team like the Spurs, I think, are projected to be 13th in the conference with 35 wins. I believe ESPN have them at. The Lakers, they have at 44 wins in 11th, which is just insane. So it might be difficult for the top end teams, given the competitive nature, for a team like the Thunder to win 60 games. But there's just no holes. Like the holes that they did have in terms of a genuine, big man next to Chet, they've obviously eliminated that by going out and signing Isaiah Hartenstein, bringing in Alex Caruso as well via trade, which is going to be a much better fit than Josh Giddey. I think they're going to be unbelievable, and they're going to be very hard to stop in terms of at least during the regular season and finishing on top in the Western Conference. But I'd have Thunder, Wolves, Mavs, Nuggets, Suns as maybe as a top 5 in a tier. And then probably Kings, Pels, Warriors, Grizz, Rockets, Lakers, Clippers. Like you could throw a blanket over those teams, in my opinion. And maybe if the Suns have some injury issues, they could be part of it as well. And this is why, like, you look at it and you think, well, could the Warriors finish 5th? Yeah, maybe. There's certainly, like, I find it difficult to see them surpassing the Thunder, Wolves, Mavs, or Nuggets, and perhaps even the Suns as well. But the Suns could have some injury issues. They could have some chemistry issues like they had last season. New coach is going to perhaps bring some concerns early on. So could the Warriors finish in the top 6? I think absolutely. But they could also finish outside the play-in tournament. That's just how competitive this Western Conference is, and particularly this middle range of teams between kind of 5 and 12, and maybe you want to throw the Spurs in as 13 as well. For what it's worth, I did my prediction just on where I thought the Warriors would finish a few days ago, and I also had them 8th in the West, which is, I think, about the right balance in terms of having them above some of these teams in this range, but below some others. And again, it's really up to personal opinion on who you might have ahead or below the Warriors, really. Like, I had them 8th, but I think the Grizzlies might be ahead of them. I really like the Grizzlies could be a team that jump up into that 5th or 6th position quite easily. I think the Rockets obviously is another team. I think I had the Warriors 8th with them passing 3 of the Kings, the Pels, and the Lakers or Clippers, if that makes sense. So I would have I'd have the Grizzlies probably in that top 6, and then one of those 4 teams I just mentioned maybe it's 7th, and then the Warriors 8th, and then 3 of those 4 teams in the Grizzlies, Lakers, Clippers, Pelicans. In fact, you can throw the Kings in there. It's just the more you mention these teams, the more you think, like, how am I ranking them, really? Because I think it is so close. You can make an argument for any of these teams. Like, if the Rockets jumped into the top 6, now that would be a surprise, yes, but is it is it no chance? I don't think so. Like, they are a very, very talented young team, made a big leap last season. Obviously, Ime Udoka as coach is going to want to try and win ASAP, I think. So it's just super difficult. And I think it's very hard to evaluate where the Western Conference landscape kind of sits outside of that top 4 and probably the bottom 3. But even then, like, the Spurs are kind of, most people would just lock them in as 13th. And I think most people see it's too far of a jump to go from a low 20 win team to doubling that. Like, you're going to have to win 44 to 45 games at least to make the play-in tournament. I think to win double the amount of games, I think most people see as a bit of a stretch for the Spurs. But ESPN has still got them jumping over 10 wins, right? And so that puts them into 13th. But my goodness, are they a good 13th in the Western Conference? And you're going to go in any game against Wemby thinking we're in trouble here, and that there's going to be genuine concerns that the Spurs could beat you, particularly when they've added the veteran pieces in Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes, former Warriors, of course. So this Western Conference is just stupidly competitive, insanely competitive. And yeah, you could put the Warriors anywhere between 5th and 13th, probably. And you can make a legitimate argument for it. And that's why I've put them in kind of 8th. ESPN have put them in 8th in that kind of middle ground where they're above some of the teams and below some of the teams. It's a little bit of a balance. Obviously, if you have a more optimistic feel, you think they can make the top 6, that's fair enough. If you have a pessimistic glass half empty approach, then you think they might even be outside the play-in tournament. So who knows? But I do think obviously making the top 8 is important, given ideally they'd make the top 6 and not have to go through the play-in tournament. But getting a second opportunity in the play-in tournament is going to be crucial. We saw what happened last season where they finished 10th. They went in with some really, really good form, finished the regular season, 27-12 in the last 39 games. But it's a one-off elimination game. If you don't rock up on that one day, then you're done and dusted. And that's what happened. They got blown out by the Kings. So top 8 is obviously really important, but ideally getting top 6 in the West. Just to further on this point, so earlier in the week as well, the experts were asked who were most likely to take massive leaps and also take a tumble in both conferences or in the league in general next season. So the Warriors actually were voted third among the teams in terms of teams expected to take a big leap. The Grizzlies and the Spurs were 1 and 2. Now, the Grizzlies, again, absolutely ruined by injury last season, and they should be fantastic next season. As I said before, likely, I think, to perhaps be a top 6 team. Interesting that the ESPN have them only in 9th. I do think that's probably certainly lower than what I would have them. I'd have them inside the top 8, but we'll wait and see. They've got some question marks, there's no doubt. And are we just banking on the fact that everyone will come back fully healthy? That in a fully healthy team, Marcus Smart, they've still got to kind of integrate him because they weren't really able to do it last season. Obviously, bring in Zach Edey and having a rookie starting center, if they're going to do that, is going to be interesting as well. But there's no doubt that they're going to win so many more games than what they did last season, so long as they are relatively healthy. The Spurs as well, we just spoke about them. The Wemby factor, he's going to be an all-star, you'd imagine. The CP3, Harrison Barnes, bringing those guys in. But good to see the Warriors third. And it's really interesting because the Warriors also got votes. I think they were 7th or something in voting for teams expected to take the biggest tumble. So it's interesting because I don't think there's really, with this Warriors roster, I don't think there's really room to rise too much, nor is there really room to fall too much. Like, I think they won 46 games last season. I find it difficult that they're all of a sudden going to rise and win 50 plus. I do find that difficult just because of the complete lack of a second genuine all-star, lack of second genuine scorer alongside Steph. But I also think this team is super deep, relatively versatile and flexible. And if they do cop some injuries, as every team does, then they're probably going to be better suited to covering those injuries, so long as it's not Steph. Like, obviously, if Steph gets injured for any amount of time, then could be absolutely cooked, right? But so long as it's not Steph missing significant time, really anyone else, they're probably going to be able to cover it to a reasonable degree, and at least be much better suited to doing that than other teams who may be really relying on their top-end talent. So from that degree, I don't see the Warriors really tumbling either and all of a sudden winning less than 40 games, unless, of course, there's a Steph injury or something like that. So it's kind of weird to me that they would get votes on both sides, because I just see this team and think, yeah, good, average to good team going to win anywhere between 43 and 48 games. I actually think, as presently constructed, unless there's a massive trade or there's a Steph injury, I find it difficult to see how the Warriors are kind of outside that bracket of between 43 and 48 wins, right? And again, if you're a bit pessimistic, you might be on the lower end, and that means they're really just fighting to make the play-in tournament. And if you're a bit more optimistic, you might be on the higher end of that. They might win 47, 48 and get in the top 6. Who knows? But I actually think they shouldn't get votes for for either. In terms of biggest faller or biggest riser, I don't think they should get votes for either, because I think they're just going to be about what they were last season. But it's certainly interesting. Some of the player award stuff here: MVP, no Steph. I think 10 players, I think, receive votes for this. Luka is the favorite. I feel like we do this every season. And I feel like I've done this every season, where it's just like, it's Luka's year. It's his time to win it. He deserves to win an MVP. And then It just doesn't happen. I feel like this has been going on for 3 or 4 years now, where we kind of look at him as the favourite and it just doesn't happen for whatever reason. And he plays really well, but maybe it's like there's obviously conditioning concerns regularly. There's just injury issues, I suppose, that occur for him across the course of a long regular season. It just, for whatever reasons it doesn't come to fruition in a way that we've expected going into pretty much all of the last 3 or 4 seasons. So this is the case again in terms of him being favourite according to the ESPN experts. I think I think Shea might be my favourite simply because of what I said before in terms of the Thunder being a young team, and they could just roll the Western Conference in the regular season and win 60 plus games. And Shea's the best player. He's going to be efficient. Now, I suppose the argument against it could be, well, they've got some young guys who could take the ball out of his hands a little bit and put up numbers themselves. Maybe Chet takes on a bigger offensive role, particularly with less of a defensive need from him if Hartenstein's playing next to him. Jalen Williams is going to take another leap. Maybe, you look at these kind of things as reasons why Shea couldn't win it. But I just think probably going to finish with the best record in the league, in my opinion, either them or the Celtics. And Shea's out and out, clearly their best player, which when you look at the Celtics now, it's just, is it Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum? Now, I think everyone thinks Tatum's the best player, but Brown won Finals MVP. There's just no question marks around the Thunder with that. Like, Shea is their out-and-out best player. And so I think that just, produces a strong argument. He's going to average nearly 30 points a game. You'd expect him to be super efficient. That's probably my favorite at the moment. Obviously, Jokic is going to be up there again. I wouldn't be surprised if we see like a little bounce back year from Giannis, who I think after, the Bucks being eliminated back-to-back first-round series in the last 2 years, I could see him kind of coming out and making a statement and trying to help the Bucks make a statement next season as well. But even like you look at them offensively with Dame and Middleton, if those guys are fit and healthy as well, which is obviously always concerns around Middleton, I do wonder whether or not like they really need the offensive production from Giannis necessarily they have needed in the past if they've got those other two veteran guys kind of taking on the offensive load as well. But we'll wait and see. Rookie of the Year, no Warrior, of course. Quentin Post, unfortunately, did not receive any votes. But Reed Shepherd was the favourite, obviously, the young Rockets guard who was super impressive in Summer League. Edey was second. I am, like, Edey seems slated for this starting center role at the Grizzlies, which if you've got a starting role as a rookie in a team that is predicted by many to make the playoffs, like the Grizzlies, that gives you a pretty good case automatically. Like if you're a starting player, if Edey is good enough, productive enough to start essentially the entire season for the Grizzlies, and they are a playoff team, then that in itself that's huge, right? And that's a case in itself for him to be Rookie of the Year. Reed Shepherd, obviously super impressive in Summer League. I am interested to see how his minutes work out in that Rockets on that Rockets roster in their rotation, because they've just got so many young, talented players. And then, of course, you got a guy like Fred VanVleet as well, who's going to be eating up a heap of the point guard minutes as well. How much do him and Reed play together potentially? I just think that Edey's got more access to minutes and a larger role. And then I think Memphis will be better than Houston as well. And so therefore, if I was picking between the two, who are probably the two heavy favourites at the moment, I think I'd go with Zach Edey. Defensive Player of the Year, Wemby, obviously favourite. Draymond, first Warrior here, he got votes, tied 8th. I just think don't get me wrong, Draymond deserves to be more than a one-time Defensive Player of the Year. There is no doubt about that. But I think the time of him winning a depoy is probably over. Like, he's 34. He's not necessarily going to play 70-plus games, even if he, fingers crossed, hopefully he has a year where there's no suspensions, no egregious acts or misconduct or whatever else that gets him in trouble. But even so, I think at his age, and particularly if the Warriors are going to ask him to be their starting center, which could be the case, then I just don't think he should be playing more than 70 games. If you're only playing 65 to 70, that probably makes it difficult. And again, he's 34. Is he actually going to play heavy minutes? Like, I don't think Draymond should be playing more than 30 minutes a game this season, just to try and preserve him as much as possible, not just for a playoff run, but also for future years as well. I think if he is to win Depoy, from what we saw late last season, you actually need another big next to him. Like, you need Trace Jackson Davis to start in that instance for Draymond to have a chance of winning Depoy, because I just don't think he has enough of a defensive impact when he has to be the starting center. It's so difficult for him as a 6'6" guy. He can do it, yes, absolutely, but I don't think he should be doing it as a starter and at the start of the season for an entire season as well. Like, I just think that's too difficult a task for a guy of his age and the miles on his legs. And I think what we saw late last season, you put a genuine big next to him, you have TJD there, and then Draymond can play that kind of quarterback role on defense where he's really managing the defense, where he can come over as a help defender on the weak side and things like that, where he can be just around the floor a lot more and just be more disruptive around the entire floor rather than having to bang bodies with, genuine 7-footers on the other team. So his time as winning Depoy is probably unfortunately over, even though he certainly deserves more than one throughout the course of his career. There's no doubt about that. Wemby, I think, is the overwhelming and should be the overwhelming favourite. I never necessarily remember preseason games whatsoever, but it will always stick out to me. Last year's preseason game, Warriors Spurs, I think it was the last one before the start of the regular season. And particularly in the first half, like, Wemby was blocking Klay Thompson jump shots, Wiggins jump shots, and I was just sitting there in awe, thinking, what are we watching here? Like, this is just stupid. This is something we've never seen before. And immediately I saw that and was like, okay, we're going to have to put this guy in the Depoy conversation in his rookie year. And that was I think I had it on this podcast. You can probably go back to it in October last year where I said that, like, he will be in the Depoy conversation. It kind of took a while for that to come into fruition, but it eventually did by the end of the season, and he was in the Depoy case, obviously. Rudy ended up getting it, but maybe Rudy only got it because they knew that this was the last time they wouldn't be able to give it to Wemby, because there's a chance he could win the next 10 Depoys straight. Sixth man of the year, no Warrior, which I think comes down to the fact, like, who is the Warriors' sixth man right now? Like, I personally think Pods should be the sixth man. If that was the case, Pods could be a shout. Like, he's definitely going to have the access to minutes. He's definitely going to play the 25, 30 minutes a game, 25 to 30 minutes a game that would be required. But it sounds like the Warriors want to start him next to Steph and then also have him as the backup point guard. So who is the Warriors sixth man? Is it D'Anthony Melton then? Is it Buddy Hield? Is it Kuminga? Is it Wiggins? Is it like, who is it? We don't know who the Warriors sixth man is, and that's just another kind of flaw of their roster where we have a lack of hierarchy, where there's so many question marks on starting lineups, combinations, who their sixth man is, who's in the rotation in general. So that's just a product of that, really, and the fact that they don't have a genuine sixth man right now that you could look at and necessarily vote on to win this award. Malik Monk, Alex Caruso, I think were the top two or equal favourites, whatever it was, for sixth man of the year there. You could certainly see one of those two guys winning it. Most improved, JK, 8th. No Pods. Of course, Pods came out earlier this offseason and stated that he wanted to be in the most improved player conversation. Not there yet, not predicted to be there yet anyway, according to the ESPN experts. I actually was surprised. I went back through this. JK didn't actually earn any MIP votes last season. So there were 14 players that got most improved player votes, like a vote. And he wasn't one of them last season. And I just found that strange because he was like 4th or 5th in favoritism with like a month to go in the season. So I did find that surprising. And therefore, as a result, if he didn't get most improved votes last season, then maybe that actually boosts his chances of winning this season. But you look at his numbers and you think, okay, so he averaged 16 points a game last season. To win most improved from there, particularly when like JK, his biggest asset is as a scorer, right? To win most improved player from there, you'd probably have to average 25 or very close to it, 24, 25, which I think is possible. I don't think that's out of reach, but I think that most of us would still consider it unlikely. I think, first of all, if we can get to 20 points a game, that's got to be kind of the starting point, hopefully. 24 to 25, again, not out of reach, but probably unlikely. And therefore, I do actually think there's maybe more room for Pods to be a candidate for this award, simply because of 9 points a game last season. If you can bump that to nearly double, like upwards of 15, 16, 17 maybe, then maybe there's more room for him to be a most improved candidate over JK. But we'll wait and see. I do have an issue with Wemby being the favourite for most improved, and I think a lot of people have this argument where we're like, really? Like, he is a franchise-altering phenom, number one overall pick. We fully expect him to come out and be an all-star next season. Like, most improved players should go to someone who isn't expected to be as good as they are, or has kind of come from nowhere to be like a really solid, good player in the NBA, not someone who was top of their draft, who is literally a generational talent who we all expect to be a perennial all-star for the next 12 to 15 years. And that's just how this award goes sometimes. Like Maxey, I actually don't mind Maxey winning it because, you look back, he was a 23rd overall, 21st, 23rd overall pick, whatever he was. So guys that are like late first rounders kind of thing, rather than top tier prospects, I don't like it. The only way I'd really want to give it to a top tier prospect is if they actually come out early in their career and don't look great and then take a massive significant jump. Like JK's on the border of like, okay, 7th overall pick. I think he'd be more in the conversation for me when you're talking about a guy who was obviously his playing opportunity over his first 3 seasons in the league has come and gone a little bit. It's fluctuated. Therefore, I could see him being a candidate and being a reasonable player to win this award. Pods obviously is a 19th overall pick. Completely get him being in the conversation and wanting to be in the conversation. Just Wemby could be winning any of these other awards. He could win MVP. He could win. He's probably definitely going to win Depoy. Like, he's going to win a couple of these other awards. He shouldn't be winning MIP, in my opinion. And Coach of the Year, Tibbs was the favourite, no Steve Kerr, which is, again, not surprising. But, I mean, if the Warriors, what would the Warriors have to do? Probably win 54, 55 games and be top 2 in the West. Again, super unlikely, and I think that's reflected in the ESPN experts and their predictions here. Now, the last thing, before we finish this episode, the last thing I want to dig it into, which it makes me laugh just thinking about it. It really does. It's the most hilarious prediction, whatever you want to call it, I've ever seen in my life. It's the question of who is going to get their first All-Star selection next season. The top of the voting, we have some very obvious names. Who leads it again? Wemby, of course. Absolutely understandable, likely to be an All-Star for the first time next season. Got most of the votes. Second is Chet Holmgren, understandable. Another guy expected to take a massive leap individually. Going to be on a very good team in the Thunder, understand that. Mikal Bridges going to the Knicks, bigger market, probably gives him more of an opportunity to be an all-star for the first time. Jamal Murray, I think, is probably the one guy in the league that we are most surprised that hasn't been an all-star in the league. Cade Cunningham, former number 1 overall pick, can understand that. Evan Mobley as well. So that's the top 6, right? You got 4 guys there who are 23 years of age or under, and you've got Murray and Bridges who are both 27. And then in 7th place in the voting, for what reason, I do not know, Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield is 7th in this voting in players that are going to be a first-time All-Star next season. I actually thought it was a typo. I went through and I thought, like, what are we doing here? Like, I hope Buddy Hield has a great first season with the Warriors. I'm looking forward to watching him play. Looking forward to him knocking down a bunch of threes. He will not be an All-Star. Surely. Like, in what way can he be an All-Star? So for starters, well, you need the opportunity, and I don't think many of us think Buddy Hield's going to start. So what is he going to be, an All-Star as a bench guy? I wouldn't have thought so. It's just this. I don't get the reasoning. I'd love to know. So with this voting system, so Buddy Hield got 3 votes, and with this voting system, so ESPN experts give 3 different players, right? So they give 3 points awarded to the player they obviously most think will become an All-Star for the first time, and then a second and a third option as well. So that means that either one expert thinks that Buddy Hield is his number one choice over Wemby, over everyone else in the league, his or her, I should say, their number one choice to be an All-Star for the first time next season, which is just mind-blowing in itself. Or, equally as mind-blowing, is it multiple people think Buddy Hield, multiple of these experts think Buddy Hield is going to be an All-Star for the first time next season. I don't know what's more ludicrous. Like, either way, it's stupid. It's just, I literally cannot believe that. And then, like, the other 2 players that receive votes, Jaime Hackers Jr., which I don't think he's going to be an All-Star next season, but whatever. And then Alperen Şengün. Again, 2 other guys who are really, really young. Hackers is, 23 entering his second season. Şengün's, still 22. All these guys are young. And in the case of Murray and Bridges, they're 27, still maybe just entering what should be the prime of their careers. And then you've got a 32-year-old Buddy Hield just sitting there for some reason in this voting. It is unbelievably bizarre. I really want to know who it was that voted for Buddy Hield and what the reasoning was, or whether they just thought they'd be sneaky and take the piss for this question. Because, you go through all the other questions, and I don't think, nothing has necessarily jumped out at me as, oh, that's crazy, aside from this. And I'm saying this as a Warrior fan, hoping Buddy Hield has a huge season for the Warriors, and he's fantastic. If he's an All-Star, great, fantastic. How is it going to happen? Tell me how it's going to happen. Anyway, we're going to finish the episode there on that. Pure comedy, you'd have to say. Buddy Hield, the first-time All-Star next season. The other thing with him as well is he's coming off a season where he had the worst scoring season of his career over the last 6 years. So if anything, Buddy Hield might be actually on the downward trajectory of his career. Now, hopefully, maybe there's a boost with coming to the Warriors. Maybe he does go from, I think he averaged 12 points a game last season. Maybe he goes back up towards 15. I mean, is he going to average the 20 to 25 at least required to be an All-Star? What are we doing here? Honestly, come on, ESPN, turn it up. Anyway, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that would be greatly appreciated. Follow me at POK252. That's POK252 on X/Twitter. I'm just going to go and chill now after talking about Buddy Hield being an All-Star next season. It's quite unbelievable, but thank you very much if you've got through to this point of the episode, and I hope you have a great weekend.